Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 87 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. Episode 87, it may be, but it's only the second episode of 2017. And as viewers of Fracking Nightmare will know, that's primarily because I'm spending so much more time in the north of England on the front line of the anti-fracking campaign. And if you want to get an update on what's going on within that campaign, then join us at 9 o'clock this evening. And we'll be taking a look at the escalation of gratuitous police aggression at Preston New Road. And considering the possibility that this is a repeat of Maggie Thatcher's command, effectively, to maximise the brutality against, as it was in 84, the coal miners, and now the anti-fracking community. So anyway, that's at 9 o'clock. But meanwhile, I'm delighted to welcome an old friend of mine on this episode of Humanity vs. Insanity, and that's Thomas Sheridan, who's coming to us live from the west coast of Ireland, over in County Sligo. So Thomas, welcome.
Oh, Ian, it's great to be back.
Hey, well, it's quite a while since I think we did a Humanity vs. Insanity. In fact, I don't think we've done one with you since before AV7. And of course, you're coming back over to the UK for AV8 in about 6 weeks' time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Well, you know, I mean, you're a regular feature now of the Alternative View conferences. And, you know, the Alternative View conferences are evolving into a mix of sort of regular speakers and new faces. And I know, I mean, a lot of people come along, you know, to spend a weekend with old friends. And Thomas, I'm pleased to say that the residential element of the conference, the hotel rooms, are basically sold out. In fact, we're about to change the website to let people know that effectively there's a waiting list for the if they want to be residential at the conference. So we are going to make some day tickets available. But you know, what's your experience of the AV events compared to other events that you participate in?
Well, I stopped. You know, I don't do a lot of events anymore because I was sent. I just wanted to make it special. So there was a time I used to do events all the time, and now, so comparing AV events to any others, they're in a league by their own. They're First of all, it feels like a village that reassembles every year or something. You see a lot of the same people, not just the speakers, which is, I think that's a great idea to have a kind of a residency, because that actually people will know, oh, so and so will be there the following year. But also the punters themselves, it's almost like a family vibe. There's that kind of element of you know, everyone has a great time together. Everyone's so nice, it's so friendly, it's so casual. But it's also that's because that's a tribute to yourself and your own organizational skills. I know that behind the scenes, while everyone is having a great time and the stage and everything runs really well, I know that you and your crew have put months and months of work into that. So I mean, when something works that well, it's not a fluke. It's always because of, you know, excellent and professional organization. And yeah, well, that's what it comes down to. It's just in a league of its own, just because it's so different. Just because of that family vibe, that friendly vibe. I know people who go there, and they even, you know, they meet up and everything, and they develop friendships for life. It's just wonderful. I have a cat here who's trying to knock the PC.
Oh, well, I wonder what it was knocking on your microphone.
Yeah, they have like AV too. But yes, that's it. You know, like success isn't a fluke. So you know, people like you and I, and anyone who has achieved success in alt media, we all know it's been a hell of a lot of hard work. And one of the things I love about AV7 is that people come along to actually say, you know, thank you in person, and that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and you know, I think what makes it for me is, first of all, yes, I do have a great team, and it's a small team, but you know, they are truly outstanding, and you know, I'm extremely grateful for all the effort that they put in to make the events happen. But I think, you know, for me, you know, it's almost like the conference is just the catalyst to bring this community together. And it's the stuff that happens after the events because of discussions and conversations that have taken place over meals in the bar, out in the grounds of the hotel. And months later, I might hook up with someone, and they'll tell me what they've been doing in their community with other people who live close by that they met at AV. So who knows what pebbles are thrown into the pond at AV events, and then they germinate elsewhere. So I'd love to see similar events, because, as you say, I mean, it is unique. It's residential, brings people together for 3 days, and I hope we can keep it going. Unfortunately, we're pretty much at the capacity of the hotel, so it's such a stunning venue as well, and so I'm reluctant to change the venue just to be able to get a few more people along.
Yeah, the venue's fantastic. In the heart of this beautiful English countryside. Last year, I was getting up at like 6 and 7 in the morning and going for walks out into the fields and stuff. It was that nice. So that's the isolation of it is beautiful as well. It doesn't mean you're isolated, because there's so much going on in the place. But yeah, it's like a boot camp for the soul and for the mind.
Okay, well, hey, listen, I say we're pretty much sold out of the residential rooms. There will be a few day tickets available. They will go online at the weekend. We'll also publish the schedule so that if you want to come for one day, then at least you get to know who you're going to be seeing. But more importantly, you'll be getting an opportunity to get a little taste of the AV experience, and then maybe next year come along as a resident at the conference. So Thomas, I mean, obviously we cover a pretty wide range of subjects at the AV events, and I sense that for 2017 there's probably a greater degree of optimism. Now, that may seem a strange observation considering what's dominating the lamestream media right now, and we'll come back to that. But that is perhaps a reaction to the fact that the establishment is not getting its own way as much as it might like.
Well, I don't want to preempt my presentation, but you're in the same zone that I am regarding all this stuff. I think this is an absolutely incredible time in history. I wake up in the morning, can't believe what I see on the news, can't believe what I see in society, and it's all good. We got our waking up, we did, but it didn't happen the way I and others expected it. What happened was we got chaos, and in that chaos is the potential to rattle them and get what we want. I'm amazed how quickly things changed. I remember your speech, your farewell speech at AB7 last year, and it was just before Brexit, and you said it was just after Brexit, but just before Brexit, and you said that it'll probably won't pass or something like that, but whatever, get out. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And lo and behold, Brexit passing was like the beginning of a tornado of change that has been ongoing ever since. It's almost laughable how the control system has gone belly up in a state of absolute confusion, and to the point where it's bewildered. We're living in a time where they're bewildered because the old paradigms have fallen apart. They have not gotten over the shock of Brexit. They probably will never get over the shock of Trump being elected. And that's all. And it doesn't matter. I don't really particularly, care if the UK is in the EU one way or another. I don't care who's the president of the United States. But what I particularly pay attention is the chain reaction, or the opposite reaction that happens to that, because that's where the real story is. It's not it's when you get punched, it's not the punch that does it, it's what happens afterwards. And that's what's happened to them right now. They've been punched very, very badly, and they don't know how to get up off the floor. They just don't. And they're still, I thought by now they would have settled down and behaved themselves and realized that the people who voted for Brexit are not a bunch of ignorant Yahoo racists, and chavs, and the ones who voted for Trump are not ignorant Yahoo rednecks either, that there was actual genuine concerns. And I think in both cases, the reason why the majority of swing voters, and there's quite a lot of swing voters, voted for Brexit and Trump was to give one up to the establishment. And boy, did they in both cases. They gave two fingers up to the establishment and the globalists. And it's going to take them at least a decade to recover from this. And I'm loving every minute of it. I'm delighted by it, but at the same time, a wounded animal or a rat backed into a corner is something you should be careful about.
Now, without any shadow of doubt. In fact, we perceive that the actual Brexit vote was far, far greater than the 51.5, 48.5 that they claim. And, it's at a conservative estimate, it's believed that the actual vote to get out of the EU was more likely the high side of 70% to go out. But of course, that would have been just too much to swallow. But the reality was that whether they intended to try and fix it, the percentage of people who wanted out was so great. And of course, in the immediate aftermath, then they tried to claim that, because of the stock market tanked and the exchange rate tanked, which of course actually is benefiting Britain right now. The fact that the pound is about the lowest it's ever been against the dollar. But of course, that's great for what's left of British manufacturing. So you're absolutely right. It definitely didn't go their way, and the same with Trump. Although they seem to be doing everything they can to get Trump into line, but we'll come back to that. But I get the feeling, the sense that people are stepping into their power now. I mean, by that I'm not suggesting that the entire population, but a significant percentage of the population, and I think it's actually also resonating through the rest of Europe, where people are saying, you know what, enough's enough, and this subjugation, not just to a nation state, but to a European superstate. This subjugation is not doing us any favors. And, unless we actually get off our backsides and participate in bringing about the changes that we know we need to see, then the prognosis is pretty dire.
Well, for years, I was telling people not to vote. But if you do vote, vote for independence, because it will rattle the major parties in power. If you're going to vote for the ones who will derail cushy agendas and political, so we say, dynasties. And I think people are finally learning that it's like your vote means nothing if you're voting for what the politician is promising. But your vote can almost be like a form of insurgency if you vote for what the politician doesn't want. And I think that's a kind of a canny mindset that a lot of people are finally figuring out, particularly working class people. In Britain, the working class would basically abandon the Labour Party because it had been, since Tony Blair, pushing essentially Thatcherite policies and calling it Labour. And the working class in Britain and the lower middle class became increasingly marginalised from the democratic process until Brexit came along, and then the working class saw a chance to give one up to the establishment. And that was exactly what happened there. It wasn't, I would say it was as much a protest vote as it was any kind of philosophical or any other kind of vote. But that was almost like the deliberately sabotage. Now, why are people trying to deliberately sabotage? Because more and more people, because nobodies like us have been gnawing at the furniture for years, are finally that someone's noticing that the table is wobbly. And they know that the globalists don't have their best interest in hands. I recently made a documentary about the Green Party. One of the platforms of that, all the Green parties all go back to the German Green Party. And in their 1980 TV ad, one of the central points they make is that a vote for the Greens is a vote for globalization. And now nobody says the word globalization except to hide it or run, as a slur. And that's certainly not the people in power ever mention the word globalization, because it's now become a dirty word, which it should be, because it is. And it is a dirty word. And that's what's happened. These people have they're learning, they're waking up. They're not waking up to a kind of a global revolution. In fact, it's beautiful how it's being done. It's very clever and it's very canny. And for all our being disheartened by the masses, yes, the ones I think there's a silent. There used to be a silent Ian. There used to be a silent minority. I think now they're a silent majority. And I think a lot of the stuff that you and I were slagged for saying 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago is now in their heads and they're agreeing with it, or at least taking it in. But they may not be talking about it at work. They may not be the discussion with their MEP or their European MEP, but they know this stuff. They keep it in their heads. They shut their mouths, and if they do talk about it, it's like incognito on the internet. And I think that's what's happening. We now have a silent majority.
Well, and I think as well that I mean, in the UK, the fracking issue has been a gift on so many levels because it's bringing communities together like probably nothing else, with the possible exception of poll tax, which of course was a Maggie legacy. But people that have never ever had cause to question the establishment are now starting to realize that actually they've been deceived and that the democratic deficiency is literally on the brink of destroying the UK in terms of democratic process. And so what we've got is communities now, particularly in the north of England, in pockets of the south, particularly in the north, coming together, and instead of just either rolling over and going along with whatever Westminster says, or just being a minor irritant because they're so far north of London that nobody really cares, people are coming together, from right across the social, political and philosophical demographic. And this is creating a problem because it's not a traditional hierarchical structure. It's a horizontal, it's like a hydra. In fact, it's like a hydra on a hydra, which is a fractal, as was pointed out to me recently. So what we have is a fractal as opposed to a hierarchy, and the establishment has no idea how to deal with it because they can't infiltrate it in the way in which they have traditionally infiltrated, for example, NGOs that are a little bit of an irritation.
Well, you said that to me years and years ago when we first met. I don't know where it was, and you said the beauty of being diverse in a true way is that there's no leaders and you can't be co-opted. And there's a lot of truth to that. See, that's why they'd have like all these politicians trying to lure people back into the Greens or into like left-wing politics in particular, but also the right-wing idiots as well, and Britain First of these kinds of groups. And they want people in so they can control them. Because once you have them in the system, you have a mandate, you have a statute, a constitution, and they have to abide by it. And they absolutely hate the fact that we're all feral. We're all feral. And they even tried things like with Russell Brand to get everybody to like march behind him and this little revolution. And it fails every time because people don't want to join. They caused this to themselves because what they did was they made life as unsociable as possible. They stopped smoking in pubs. They stopped people meeting their neighbors. They kept us all watching TV sports. But that also affected them because they can no longer politically organize us around their own political agendas or their own political parties. So they as usual, they shot themselves in the foot that way. They created a society of lone wolves, which has its benefits and its negatives. And in terms of like not being able to infiltrate things like the fracking movement is one of the absolute benefits, because there's no political system that can get in there, say a leftist or Marxist idea and come in and try and turn the working class people in the anti-fracking movement against people who might be posh or from an upper class or upper middle class background. Likewise, you don't have like a conservative type of thing getting. This is how they've always done it. They always jump in and infiltrate. In Ireland, it's always like, nationalists or unionists, but that's how they do it. The beauty of this sort of like non-aligned protest is that it It's like what's that movie Fantasia, where Mickey Mouse tried to chop the broom in half, and that became two brooms, the four brooms, and that's what happens when they attack non-aligned movements.
Yeah, but I'd be a liar if I didn't acknowledge that. I mean, some of the political groups have tried, to effectively use the anti-fracking community as a platform for their broader agenda, and I think one of the great strengths is that whilst obviously around the campfire or in the sort of moments where you're not on the front line, people will discuss diverse issues and probably not agree necessarily on very much, but they're learning to get over this establishment construct where unless you agree with me on everything, Thomas, you must be a government shill. I mean, which is a brilliant construct, because the social media has been used to effectively create this arena where basically it's an echo chamber, because the only people that people communicate with are those who agree with him on everything. And fortunately, within the alternative community, there are an increasing number of people who have the intellectual maturity to be able to recognize that we don't have to agree on everything. In fact, God forbid if we did, because life would be pretty boring. But the emphasis has to be on focusing on the things that we agree on, because the establishment are past masters at creating division, and they know that if they can create that division, they can separate. Now, that's not to say that we should simply roll over and not address issues when they arise, and certainly we have had to do that a few times within the anti-fracking community, because sometimes the establishment relies on people not dealing with issues because they don't want to create division. But actually, by not dealing with the issue, you create division. So it's a fine line sometimes that you have to tread. But ultimately, you get rid of the, if you like, the festering wounds, treat them, and then get everybody focused back on track. And it's fucking amazing what can be achieved with this collective we. And it is a we, and it's getting people to recognize that there is a role for everybody on this. Not everybody can necessarily get boots on the ground. They have other responsibilities or maybe disabilities or whatever. But it's a question of getting people to identify whatever skills, abilities, time, resources that they have available, and then bring them forward. And the fact that more and more people are doing that, they don't have to ask anybody's permission. And that's another key issue, that there's no need to ask for anybody's permission. If you've got an idea, just get out there and go do it. And it's amazing what is being achieved.
Yeah. And it's the future. I think the fracking, what fellas like yourself and the people that you work with in the fracking, I think that's going to become the model that people will copy for other things.
Well, it's hard to keep it on that basis sometimes, but there are other groups around the country, like the Beat the Bailiffs community, and they've tried to sort of model themselves on this sort of similar situation where there are literally community groups, and some community groups they do have a formal structure. There's still some that like to have a chairman, treasurer, and secretary, but they're very much in the minority. Most of the groups are organic, and literally encourage people to step into their own power, use their own creativity, get away from the terminology such as have you thought of and what about, to I am doing or I have done, or join me because I'm doing this, and it's little things like that that make such a massive difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't add anything to that. You're absolutely 100% right.
Now, so Thomas, in Ireland, you do have political dynasties. People in the UK may not necessarily be aware of this, but you have political dynasties, much more so than in the UK. You have a situation in Ireland where often a seat in the Dáil is actually handed on when somebody dies or retires. It's actually handed on to a family member, and they actually campaign on the basis of not having achieved anything, but literally campaigning on the basis of the achievements of their father or whomever.
Oh, it goes back to even great grandfather. We do have a royal family in this, and royalty, and it was allegedly we're a republic, but we do have royalty in political dynasties, and it's absolutely comical when some gobshite knocks on your door and says my grandfather was this, that, and the other. Yes, not only do they hand the seats down, I don't mean literally hand them down, but they run for election based on Granddaddy McGinty's past or whatever. He got them a road, a motorway or something, or a factory, 50 years ago. Not only did they campaign on that, but they will also get the ministerial positions, that their great grandfather held. And the cabinet positions. It's just truly bizarre. Now, this is the fault of the Irish people. Ireland is a very parochial country, and politics is extremely local here. In fact, if you're hard pressed to find anyone in Ireland that sees themselves as Irish, they're nearly their local county first, and then they're Irish. It works. We still run by 1,000 chieftains here in many ways. And so, like, there's, for all their national identity, Irish identity, majority of people in this country don't see themselves that way. They see themselves in their local kind of thing. And a lot of these politicians and political dynasties play on that. You also have some bizarre things. People have sympathy votes and things like that. Like, one guy got into the Dáil about 20 years ago because his father fell off a cliff. His father used to be a politician. I mean, and he ran on that thing. My daddy fell off a cliff. He was your politician. Make me the politician. And that's literally, and people voted for him because, you poor guy, his dad fell off a cliff. This is the kind of thing that goes on here. It's truly hilarious at times. That's what it's like here. That's our royal families, and I think that will change. I think a lot of people, although I don't know, I know people. Here's like one of the things that I'll give you an example of. That when the Green Party flopped in this country after being in government, we actually had a Green Party in government in a coalition. They're the ones who signed off on the IMF thing with Fianna Fáil. A lot of the Green Party was wiped out because nobody liked them in the end, and a lot of them all went back to join the political party that they, and were saying things like, "Well, I was traditionally a Fianna Fáil or a Fine Gael family member," and this is the mentality. But yeah, I know people who will vote for something because their granddaddy voted for them, and this kind of thing. The absolute nonsense is unbelievable, and that I can't ever see that changing here. And it suits the political system very well because it keeps a cozy, cushy, bloodline kind of thing. Not in a kind of an esoteric sense. It's more in a kind of a grubby mafioso sense.
Yeah,
it's more of a. Well, yeah, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And it's one of the reasons I don't vote here. But you also it's not just in politics. If you look at a lot of TV stars, pop music singers, they're all the children of ex politicians. It's like Orwell's Inner Party in 1984. It's once you're in that club, you're made for life. Top TV presenter, his grandfather was Todd Andrews. He was instrumental in the War of Independence here. He was the Minister of Transport and Industry for decades, and now he's the top TV presenter. The nepotism is unbelievable here.
And you're 8.5 years now after the financial collapse, or obviously it was a contrived collapse, as we know, and I think it was the 28th of September 2008, the infamous meeting where Brian Gowan and Cowan and the finance guy Lenihan. Cowan and Lenihan were effectively forced to sign over the entire assets of the Irish nation to the central banks. So 8.5 years on, I mean, do you sense that the Irish people have learned anything from this? I mean, are they just going to roll along and watch while Britain, does whatever it does out of the EU, or are they actually going to be motivated to maybe go their own way?
Well, economically, it's back. It's getting back to Celtic Tiger times, particularly in Dublin. The prices are back in the Greater Dublin area. It's back to how it was in 2007. Prices are through the roof. Everyone's making lots of money, and property is, cranes are all over the skylines again, building more office blocks and this kind of thing. So that's the weird thing about it. Where the country has been damaged is in the rural areas. They've fallen a long way behind and they've been depopulated. And a lot of that is very, I see that a lot. A lot of people have moved to the cities and moved out. The countryside is definitely changing. You see, when I first moved here nearly 20 years ago, every farm was tended, every blade of grass in every field was cut, every hedgerow was trimmed. And now I'm seeing wilderness growing everywhere, trees growing on fields that were once pasture for cattle and sheep and this kind of thing. And that's the exodus from the land. The farmers are, their sons have moved to the cities to actually work in service industry and things like that. And once that's lost, it's lost forever. It's not a skill you can, we ever had an emergency. Regarding the EU here, yes, absolutely. A lot of people don't like it anymore. A lot of people, there was two kinds of things. When Brexit happened, 50% were like, England has gone nuts. 50% was, we should follow them next. And now that 50% of that 50% was saying that Britain and Ireland on their own could form a pretty good English-speaking trade bloc that could trade with the US, Canada, and the former nations of the British Empire. And then some people were saying, well, that kind of puts us back in the Union and kind of economically again. There's a lot of this kind of thing going on. But I think there's a generation now. There's two generations nearly now that have grown up and not known anything but the European Union. It's as real to them as being in Ireland. That's just part of their lives, and I don't know how they'll react. But I think most people will. The attitude is now, I would say 60%. We either have to leave the EU or the EU has to change radically, and that even though it's 60% or 55, 60%, that is a quantum leap from say 10 years ago, where you'd had 98% EU approval in this country.
But now the concerning thing there, Thomas, is the observation about the evacuation of the rural areas. And ironically, I mean, this is exactly what I was talking about when I was touring Ireland in 2011 with the pillage of Ireland's resources, where I was actually explaining that this was the plan to effectively get people off the land so that the corporations could come in and literally mine Ireland for its resources in the same way that Gina Reinhardt, in particular, has effectively had free reign to bring in the mining companies into Western Australia. And you've got a massive shale basin, of course, the Loch Allen Basin, which actually just crosses over the border into County Fermanagh. But I've always said that that is a target of the hydrocarbons industry, and of course a bulk of the Irish fishing waters sold to the EU for a one-off payment of €6 billion. So the concern must be though that Ireland is being led down a path where it has no possibility of self-sufficiency. And by the way, the same thing is happening here in the UK. And if the unconventional gas, the fracking industry, gets established, particularly in the north of England, then we're going to see the same depopulation of the north of England that you guys have witnessed in Ireland over the last decade.
If they start fracking on the border between the North and the Republic here, one of the things that I lose sleep about that is that underneath this part of Ireland there are massive cave systems that travel for miles and miles, limestone cave systems. If underground lakes, they're huge, they're immense, they're way down, and this was an earthquake zone 500 years ago. The mountains that I live on are all smashed up because of these kind of collapses on the ground. If they were to start fracking this underground cave system to get at this stuff, it could literally cause an apocalypse. You could be talking of several dozens of square miles at a time collapsing into the ground. This is a very fragile landscape. This is a very dangerous landscape. And the limestone caves, when you get to the cliffs and you see them, how vast their systems are under the ground, and how where they run right where the fracking zones are. And this they would be playing the most dangerous game of geological roulette to start fracking on, around County Fermanagh and County Leitrim. It's People up there are actually like worried they're going to wake up one morning and find themselves literally in hell.
So, well, what you've just stumbled upon is the common denominator, because the same is going to apply to large areas of the UK, particularly all the way up the Eastern Pennines, and in the old coal mining areas, where a lot of the mines there, I mean, aren't properly mapped. And they got a rough idea, but the National Coal Board wasn't renowned for maintaining detailed maps of what was actually going on underground. So it's pretty much a bit of a shot in the dark. And there's a lot of subsidence all the way up the eastern side of the Pennines, obviously, as the mine workings settle or flood or whatever. And in the US, Oklahoma has become the earthquake capital of the US. For less than a decade ago, Oklahoma was very stable geologically, and now it's the least stable state in the US. Taking over from California as the prime earthquake center. So on the basis, this is an industry that's really only been around for about a decade and a half, 2 decades maybe max in the US, a decade in Australia, not yet started in the UK yet, or Ireland, and yet despite the evidence, the irrefutable evidence of the ecological, or the geological and ecological damage that this industry causes, both in terms of contamination of water, soil, and air. What's your thoughts on why they are pursuing such an outrageous agenda, despite the fact that the evidence would suggest that common sense should stop it immediately?
I think they're insane. I really do believe that now. I mean, the petrochemical industry is a dying industry. We've reached a point a long time ago now where any kind of oil is more expensive to get out of the ground than to actually sell in the marketplace. And oil itself is so heavily, involved in needing subsidies. And that's before we even get into Middle Eastern wars and paying off Saudi Arabia and Israel and all the rest of them out there, and the other Gulf states. It makes no sense to me. I've gone over the fracking thing over my head over and over again. And yes, we know there are psychopaths running the show, but we know that even psychopaths are not stupid. These people are almost psychotic. I mean, it's almost psychotic. Uh, the risks that they're taking are enormous. So, suppose they do start drilling around here or in the mines on the eastern side of the Pennines, and there's a huge geological disaster, and we know there's a good chance of that as well. Where is the payoff for them business-wise? I mean, I don't understand it. That's almost like they're junkies who are addicted to oil. There's sometimes I actually think that oil is like heroin to like the globalists, and they're actually hooked on it like it's smack or crack or some other drug, and they don't care if the whole world runs on or oil talks to them. That's another thing. It's almost like you feel so like when you see these interview these Texas oil families, they have a relationship, and so do the Gulf state Saudis, the royal families. They have a relationship with oil that's almost like a family member or something, or a pet. It's truly bizarre and truly strange. It's almost like oil is talking to them or communicating with them or something. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I would be open to any kind of spooky possibilities about it at this stage, because it makes no sense at all.
No, in the realms of logic, you're absolutely right. But it is interesting times, and obviously we have to get off this hydrocarbon-driven economy. That's part of the attachment to it. It's called black gold for a reason, because people say there's no relationship between oil and gold. It's just pure coincidence that for the last 60 years, a barrel of oil has averaged 7.66% of an ounce of gold. So that's why it's called black gold. It's as good as having gold in the ground. But people are starting to realize that this addiction to oil has to be broken somehow. In the UK, we're seeing subsidies taken away from renewables, because the executives of the hydrocarbons industry lobby the politicians. And a few years ago, it would have been called corruption. Now it seems to be sort of business as usual. So anyway, Thomas, we're coming up to the end. I'm absolutely looking forward to having the opportunity to sit down with you. You're going to stay for an extra night at AB this year, aren't you? You're going to stay over on the Tuesday night. On the Monday night. The Monday night.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to do that. I want to have a kind of a talk with people and do a workshop on the Monday.
Excellent. And I've been asked by a number of people, are you going to bring a selection of your books? Apparently, in the past, you've travelled fairly light, too light for some people, because you haven't had any books available, or not enough. So are you going to bring some of your work over?
Last year, I hadn't got the money to buy them. It's literally that I have to buy my own books from the publisher, or from the printers, the ones that I do myself, or the ones that the publisher pulls. I get them at wholesale prices, but it's literally I didn't have the money to buy them last year. And literally, it was literally that. This year, I made a few quid, and I would promise I will bring books.
Excellent. Well, hey, listen, you've touched on what you're going to be talking about at AB8, and I can absolutely guarantee that people who attend AV will not agree with everything you or any other speaker says, but the clue is in the name of the event, the alternative view. So, the important thing is that we are deliberately controversial, and that we are constantly stimulating people to do their own research, and indeed to challenge us and challenge each other, and of course challenge the establishment.
Yeah, and look, the way is if you want to go through your life being offended, what are you doing in this scene? Join the SJWs and all the snowflakes running around with purple hair, scared of Trump. You should be beyond that in this scene. Look, I see this scene and my work as an extension of, say, what happened to the punk rock movement in the 70s. Everyone hated it, but then everyone wanted to see it because it was going to change the world. If you want to live your life being a pussy, then you really have no place involved in this stuff. You really don't. Go back and watch EastEnders and X Factor. But if you want to sit there and listen to people, look, there are people that will be on the stage. I won't agree with some of their stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm going to question their humanity. I'll be, they're not, I look down on them as people. We have to get over this. We're all different. We all have opinions, and some people have a different way of doing it than others. If you don't like it, well, that's tough. If you do like it, that's great. But at least once you're involved in the process of communication and the process of being challenged, you'll always find potentials. It's definitely true that the reason why AB events are so successful and so challenging is because of all the diverse range of opinions. I and everyone else needs to have ourselves challenged and to have our way of thinking questioned. Otherwise, we become a cult. And you know what cults are like? They become crazy. They run boycotts. They do stupid things, and they all end up in the loony bin in the end. Do you want to go like that? No, we won't.
Absolutely. Thomas, as always, an absolute pleasure to have you as a guest on Humanity versus Insanity. And I'm with you. By the way, you earlier made the observation that you've stopped doing a lot of events and now focus on key events, and I'm the same. Absolutely. For me, it's AV, maybe a few other events during the year, but it all comes down to AV for me. So, Thomas, thanks very much, and we'll see you in May.
See you then, Ian, and thanks to you and everyone else, and I'll see you all in May.
Absolutely. An absolute pleasure. So there you have it. That's Thomas Sheridan. And if you want to sit and have a chat with Thomas in person, then, obviously make an effort, come along to AV. And if you want to check out the availability of the day tickets, then go to the website, which is on screen here. It's it's www.alternativeview.co.uk. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you not next week, but soon. Thanks a lot. Bye now.